Welcome to Module 2, Part 2, still Foundations of Public Finance. In developing the growth of the public sector, there are different models that are being considered. First is the developmental model, wherein it focuses on changes in economic structures and needs as development occurs. It concurs broadly with the facts, but the process is mechanistic. There is no process of economic choice involved. Developmental model has three stages, namely the early stage of development, the middle stage of development, and the developed phase. The first one is the early stage of development, wherein it occurs in period of industrialization. Infrastructure expenditures are required as population moves from the countryside to the urban cities. The second one is the middle stage, wherein infrastructure expenditures become increasingly complementary with the expenditure by private sector. An increasing proportion of expenditure is diverted to control the externalities. And lastly is the developed phase of the public sector, wherein expenditure is primarily driven by the desire to react to issues of equity. It results in transfer payments becoming the main item of expenditure. Under the political model, the level of expenditure can be viewed as an outcome of political equilibrium moderated by elections. The preference of the government to spend money competes with the preference of the public who do not want to pay taxes. In the absence of external changes, expenditure is then held constant, wherein periods of significant upheaval occasionally arise and equilibrium is suspended, which permits the government to raise expenditures. There are two effects under the political model. The first is the Rache effect, wherein it refers to the escalation in production or prices which tend to self-perpetuate. Once productive capacities have been added or prices have been raised, it is difficult to reverse these changes because people are influenced by the prior highest level of production. Therefore, the government sustains the level of expenditure after the period of upheaval, and taxpayers become accustomed to a higher level of tax. Also, there will be a higher level of debts being incurred by the government in this kind of setting. On the other hand, inspection effect occurs after an upheaval when taxpayers and government reconsiders their positions and priorities. There are two views under the excessive government. First is the traditional view wherein bureaucrats conduct the business of government without political or personal bias, while in the alternative view, bureaucrats are motivated by maximization of private utility or satisfaction, which they obtain from pursuing non-monetary goals related to the bureau size, wherein the budget and costs are known to the bureaucrats but not to the government. The pursuit of personal objectives by bureaucrats lead to an excessively large bureau. The excessive government's budget setting model analyzes the determinations of budget for governmental departments. It also allocates a central budget on the basis of bids by ministers, secretaries, or representatives. Bids are proportionately reduced to reach a final allocation budget. The public sector can award itself a monopoly in the supply of goods and services, which can be exploited to oversupply output. A position of monopoly might be then extended to the market capture. The market capture arises from the nature of goods and services supplied by the public sector, which are both complex in nature and not fully understood by the consumers or the public, and the demand is not expressed through a market and is delegated to specialists who also set the level of supply. This would lead to consequences of market capture when the specialists can set the level of output that most meets their objectives, particularly expansion of their professions. And they reach a trade-off point between income and power arising from the size of the profession. Moreover, this unprofessional behavior will lead to corruption, imperfect information, and cost diffusion. Under corruption, the consequences of government officials seeking personal gain can reduce economic growth by discouraging entrepreneurship. By then, predator regulations involves intentional creation of regulations so that entrepreneurs must pay bribes. The bribery may liken to the allocation via an auction, but it has negative effects throughout the system. Imperfect information is when the cost is low, the government then will claim the highest cost or highest price from which the rent is obtained. And lastly, cost diffusion. It is when spending authorities are disbursed while a central treasury collects revenues. The revenue is a common resource pool that each spending authority draws upon without considering the consequences on others. It can be made worse by increasing decentralization. So, what is decentralization? In analyzing the public sector, there are different techniques being used. The first is the normative versus positive finance and economics. The effect of policy is determined by contrasting the equilibrium with the policy and without it. Positive analysis explains why there is a public sector, how government policies are chosen, and how these policies affect the economy as a whole. Normative analysis investigates what the best policy is and aims to provide a guide to good government. It also assumes that the government has an objective and chooses its action to achieve the objective. The government's objective is often taken to the aggregate welfare, which assumes some degree of comparability of individual utility or satisfaction. In using positive and normative analysis, one should consider that you should know the activities that the public sector engages in and how they are organized. Also, you should understand and anticipate the full consequences of these government actions and evaluate alternative policies. You should also interpret the political process of those policies. Efficiency versus equity has been a debate ever since. Efficiency means society is getting the maximum benefits from the scarce or limited resources. Equality, on the other hand, means that those benefits are being distributed uniformly among the members of the society. In using efficiency, the government aims to implement the policy with the minimum loss to society. The use of policy will cause a loss due to the resources used in the implementation process and from the economic distortions that the policy will cause. Minimizing these losses is the efficiency aspect of policy design. In equity, on the other hand, the government aims to intervene in the economy in order to attain a more equitable distribution of the economy's resources. This is often accompanied by the corresponding reduction in the degree of concern for the aggregate level of economic activities.
And that's the end of Module 2. Please study the slides and research more about the topics. I also gave a supplementary video that will help you better understand how public finance works. Thank you.